y'all, don't worry. You can see us. We cannot see you, but we can see your name that you're here. So if you have a little dog barking in the back, if you're still in your pajamas, you got kids in the back, don't worry. Don't worry. Annette has a little dog in the background. Bear might pop his head in at some point. But let us know, do us a favor and let us know where you are coming from. Jace, I'd love to know where you're coming from. Chris Helen, Cami Bingham, go click the chat window, chat button below, and tell us where you are coming from. We have Peter from Breckenridge, Colorado. What's up? Here from Breck. Love that. Cami
Ireland.
From Midway, Utah. We have Ireland represented today. Oh my goodness. We got some Canadians with us. Josh, happy Canadian Thanksgiving today. You're celebrating and you're with us. That's so wonderful. Craig from Williamsburg. So good to see you. Craig, I was in Williamsburg last week. Geez, we should have hung out. And Washington State,
Manitoba.
Cleveland. So good. We got people coming from all over. We got PA in the house, Stroudsburg. Welcome. Sonia from Virginia. Oh my goodness. I love seeing it. Annette, the masses are here to hear you geek out with me about sauna myths. Before we do that, I want to make sure everybody knows what we're up to today. Maybe you've been here before. Maybe you've been on one of these webinars with us before. If not, this is an interactive space. So other than the folks who are watching the recording later on, y'all are with us right now. And so we are going to interact. This is around the coffee table kind of conversation. This isn't us get up on our soapbox and wax poetic. We're going to interact today. We're going to hear your questions. You're going to hear some thoughts from us. We are going to ask you to engage. So lean in with us today. Be here with us today. Be really connected in all of this. And also don't save your questions till the end. Send them when they come up. That's the best question. When Annette's saying something that's blowing your mind that you've never heard around sauna and you're like, what? Tell me more. Ask the question right then, as opposed to, what was that thing that Annette blew my mind on? And then I want to sort of get to that question around it. I forget what it was. So ask it right away. We're not going to save a ton till the end. We're going to answer them and filter them in as we go throughout the conversation today. So do us a favor and do that. In an effort to be interactive people in a room, we're going to send you a poll right now. Like in the moment, Lynn's, who's in the back of house right now, she's going to hit a button. And on your screen, you're going to see a quick poll. And that is going to be specific to getting to know you. So tell us, in what way are you interested in the business of sauna? You love supporting as an enthusiast. Maybe you're somebody here who is just loving it and loves all these conversations and is geeking out about the myths, and you want to join us that way. Or maybe you're thinking about starting a business of some kind. Click that one. If you're sort of in that discernment phase, you're starting to do business plans, you're starting to do market research, you're thinking of all that. Or do you have the doors open and you're like, man, this is super hard and we're serving people. We want to get better at it. And so you're here today to learn. Let us know about that. I want to introduce my dear friend as we kind of get going and as that poll is right there for us. Oop, the poll went away. Who do we got in the room, Linz? Let's share. Oh, yeah. We got some folks. We got a nice spread today. We got about a third of us who are enthusiasts. So glad you're here. Another third who's in that discernment stage. And then the bulk, 38% of the folks are currently running a business like this. That is amazing. I love it. I love seeing when we can spread this out. So good, you guys. Now, you may have met Annette before. You may have heard her on some of these things, but I need to dote for a minute because Annette's one of my favorite people in the whole world, you guys. She is the salty yoga teacher that you never knew you needed in your life. Please meet Annette Scott, CEO and founder over at Kodawari Studios and the Revivery. And Kodawari is really, I mean, Annette, you've got sort of had the background in all the wellness modalities, from body work and massage to yoga to insert some very, very niche modality. You've probably done some amount of reading, study, work, and effort on it. And now you are serving tens of thousands of Floridians with hot and cold therapy. Annette, it is such a joy to be with you today, as always. It's lovely to have you. How are you doing today?
So good and so grateful. I want to say thank you for the lead in on who, how, and what I am. And I will also give thanks for the depth and the length of our friendship. We definitely started our conversation on a business note and came to understand how deeply we share a passion for changing the world and using the practice of sauna and cold plunge, which then just naturally flowed into what kind of living do we want to have? And I found a brother from another mother in you. And I'm deeply grateful for that. It's one of those things that when you find that you're aligned and your Venn diagrams around what you care about overlaps, very graciously, we've continued to invest in not only our friendship, but in the shared passion and how it is that we want to make change in the world. And so this webinar and a course that we put together is really pointing to how to do that effectively, how to get a great ROI, because nobody needs to be poor. You got to make the money, honey. And at the same time, also make positive change in the world so that this one precious life that we have is an investment in enrichment, not just for ourselves, but for our communities. And I love that we get to spend some time today basically debunking and replacing myth that don't serve nobody with some truths and some facts and some tools and means to make that change possible.
That is it. And you guys, that is what we're going to do today. We hear these myths and these twisted truths around sauna all the time. And it is the sort of goal of our effort today, is to really highlight, hey, let's get into some truth. Let's unpack it. Let's talk about it a little bit in depth. And let's make sure we're not creating more myths along the way with sauna. And we're going to look at it from science. We're going to look at it from culture. We're going to do a little bit on history, and we're going to talk about community. And so just in terms of the framework that we operate, Annette especially, she said, hey, we align on so many of these things. We want to take a holistic approach. And what we're seeing right now is North America discovering hot and cold therapy in a way that now creates a lot of new interest, but a lot of propensity for people missing the boat and getting it wrong, right? And that, I mean, you have somebody who said, hey, I saw that on my podcast feed. I heard about this. My friend said a thing. What does it do for me? And so just before we sort of dive into myth one, I mean, that's the water we're swimming in, is this, like, there's so many new people coming into this as something of interest. We want to set them off on the right foot. We want to help them we want to get them into a space where quality matters, where culture matters, where history and science are sort of understood. And so that's what we're up to today. As we go, I want to invite people to, as those questions come up, hit the Q&A button, put them in there. Annette, that's our sort of preamble. Hit me with, you were going to say something right there, and then I want to go to myth number one. I want to get into it with everybody.
What we're doing together is talking about deliverables, and it will step us right into myth number one. When, as a business person and in the business of making change in the world, we want to do more than just offer people something that is equivalent to a workout and a piece of equipment. And this is a beautiful thing to debunk, that you're just going to have a sauna over in a corner somewhere in your business. It's more than just a simple add-on. It's literally, and of course, I want to discuss how exercise in North America, specifically America more so, the US of A, we sort of use exercise as a way to confirm for ourselves that something about us has to radically change, that we've got to, get thinner, we got to shift our metabolic rate. We've got something about us is inherently wrong, and we need to fix it, or we need to do something. And the reality is that sauna and cold plunge as a practice gives us a chance to come to rest in and be with other people in a digital free setting that inherently has untold numbers of benefits that we're only just starting to truly understand. But additionally, you know, there's a culture, and you're going to get to speak to that because you come from that lineage. I, on the other hand, am using this ancient practice in a modern application. And part of why you and I get excited about it is that it does give us a great return on investment. And the investment is multifaceted, right? It's not just, am I making money? That's a litmus of how much volume and who you're reaching and how intelligent your infrastructure is in creating the deliverable, which is the experience of feeling like you have a sense of belonging to a community, to yourself, that you know how to build resiliency. And that is, of course, for me, the conversation about using the extremes of heat and cold and gathering to remember that you're more than your worst moments. And in fact, sometimes operating under duress is where we see the best of ourselves. So you should probably touch on some of the history and the culture, because I can keep talking about the modern application until somebody goes blue.
Well, I think you're right on. And I think that this myth of the sauna is just another piece of workout equipment for a lot of Americans just simply comes from it's where they see it. They oftentimes see it in the gym with a whole bunch of workout equipment next to it. And they say, I think I should sort of, after my workout, do a set in the sauna, right? I should go in there and I do my workout. I do a little bit. Okay, I get in there and then it's 10 minutes in the sauna and I get a little sweatier and then I leave and I don't know what else to do. Whereas I would call sauna its whole practice. It's the practice of hot, cold, rest, rehydrate, and repeat. And so rather than sort of doing this little add-on, it is its own thing. It's like if I were to come to you and say, yeah, yoga's kind of nice. It's like downward dog, right? That's it. And you'd be like, excuse me, that single
Pardon me,
pose is
you've
not.
reduced this a little too much.
And why I'm bringing it up in these ways is because, and just to highlight the point you made of exercise being this thing to fix us. And that's the definition that we sort of are given is something's not right. So much of what I think is exciting about sauna is this commitment to our own health individually and a communal connection, and both a bodily health, a mental health, a physical well-being. And a resource I want to highlight, and Lindsay's going to share this, is right now we're in a world of there is a pressure for this. Yes, we all want to be healthy. Wellness is the buzzword of the hour. And Lululemon just came out with a study that they're seeing more and more that people are experiencing burnout, that wellness and that piece is this kind of push towards overwhelmed, not being well. And I think that we need to begin to be careful when people's experience of sauna is simply only go challenge yourself. When people's experience of cold plunges, go challenge yourself, because what it's taking is these previous kind of focuses of workout and exercise and trying to put it into the sauna, which I would say is not the intent of that. So,
well, we get to touch there, Justin, this idea, I have a healthy skepticism and respect for someone like Joe Rogan. He's done a great job to tell us, like, hey, this can work for you. And then he turns a little bit too heavily for me into this whole biohacking, how to biohack. And the reality for me, again, the opposite of this idea of exercise, yet again, even though there's definite bio benefits that need to be highlighted, what we're really looking at is how to enrich, how to optimize, how to create natural flow from your natural systems. We're built to be overheated and cold, to have that stimulus and have our body, it's organized for such a beautiful, powerful result that crosses the bio, the psycho, and the social aspects of what it is to be a human. And so when people are like, this is just something I do that equals exercise for me, it feels too diminishing for me. And so I think
So
that,
now,
yeah,
so
go.
now that we've hopefully broadened, right? We said, hey, sauna's not just another piece of workout equipment. It is bigger than that. We also should
Now
probably
let's
hit
get
myth
the
number
right equipment.
2 and say, what are we talking about? What is our key definition around sauna specifically? And we're going to get into myth 2 here. Remember, team, ask your questions. If that jogs something, if we expanded it out and now you got some questions, drop those in the Q&A. Myth number
So this
2,
is,
infrared sauna provides the same benefit as Nordic or traditional sauna. Annette, I'm sure you hear this all the time. I'm sure you hear it all the time. And you have an interesting perspective because in your
yeah,
studio, you owned an infrared space. Talk about
once
that.
upon a time, I fucking did that route. And allow me to say, I fell prey to the early stages of the hype around sauna, and I was like, yes, let's get one. And I had myself a long-standing practice from 2002 at that time, I literally didn't even know about infrared. And so when I bought a sauna, I thought I was buying the experience that I had had since 2002. And what I recognized when I got this thing in my building was this was an infrared. Now, I don't want to say that somebody duped me. I don't want to make it sound like that, but I didn't understand the radical difference at that time between a Nordic sauna and an infrared sauna. And I think it's really important, and you and I have had lengthy discussions about this, all the PubMed studies, all the places where it talks about what does it do for you from a bio standpoint. If we reduce it down just to that, there are so few studies, almost a negligible amount of studies that have been done on infrared and its impacts, because it tops out at about 140. And that's when you're riding this thing like you stole it. If it gets to 140, you're running it hard. And a Nordic sauna, like the benefits from all the bio research is that it starts at about 175. And so if you're not even getting to that 175 marker, you're probably not getting the bio benefits. Now, let me say, I don't want to shit on the infrared industry. There are some people that benefit from taking time with somebody in a small cabin, sauna setup. And yet I think there's so much more available. I know there's more bio benefits available. I also know that the infrared that I myself had got 0 takers, and then I pivoted, as an entrepreneur does, and moved to get the right sauna. Sorry to say it so emphatically, but that became really literally how our relationship started. I started looking for a Nordic sauna that was going to deliver the experience that I had originally intended to bring to my community. And, infrared just doesn't really cut the mustard, as we say. And the mustard on the bio front are the things that radically impact people's lives. Getting better sleep, pooping better. I mean, I have a lot of conversations about how a Nordic sauna affects your whole enteric or digestive system. It's really your second brain, how you get that second brain working, how you have it work well. We could have poop conversations, but probably not today. And the idea that you get better digestion, a better immune function, all these things, they don't really start to come into being at anything below 175. And so an infrared has its place in the world. I don't know what place that is, but I can tell you, if you're looking for the specific response from the body that we keep talking about as bringing change and improved health outcomes into being, it ain't with infrared. So if nothing else, knowing that there are these two options in the world and saying, I don't want the infrared option, I want the Nordic option, you know, I know this is a free webinar, but that was worth the cost. Price of admission, paid.
And if I can just highlight some of those things there, you know, we have a few, at least in the chat window here, a few folks who have sort of got on the bandwagon and said, hey, I can see it. Yep, the infrared piece is a sales tactic. And we do see this is common in North America. It's common in America, especially, of what's the cheap version of the thing? How can we make the meal the microwavable option that looks like food, and it is calories, but it's not nutrition. And we've been duped here in this one, that they say the benefits of sauna without oftentimes citing the sources. And so we're trying to actually cite the sources for you here. And Lindsay put some of those in there in terms of links. And I think just by way of kind of the highlight here, everybody who's beginning to talk about health benefits, they're often going back to one seminal study that was done in Finland that was a longitudinal study, Dr. Jari Laukkanen at the University of Eastern Finland. And they looked at folks who did this regularly over the course of 20 years. And that study has produced all these additional studies and all this additional stuff of, wow, the culture of sauna being so good and healthy for humans. Well, the science is catching up to it now. And very savvy marketers, of which I support a good marketer, but when you're doing it for truth. And what happened was infrared over the last 10 years said, look at how healthy sauna can be, but we're not going to tell you that it wasn't done on the same type of space. And when we begin to do that, and Josh asked a good question in here, he said, how do you define traditional or Nordic sauna? He said, hey, I asked the question in the Reddit post, and that left me with more questions and feeling a little dumb. Absolutely, Josh. So let me just highlight what I think we're going to sort of getting at here. So infrared is heating the body through infrared rays and radiation and light, usually from small panels somewhere in the room, to be kind of shined at and into the bather. And bather is a strong word here. And the heat in that space isn't very warm. It's usually 150 or less. Usually, to what Annette said, it's much more common that those top out at 140 most of the time. In traditional sauna, you're doing much more higher heat. You're doing, I would say, 160 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit commonly for traditional Finnish sauna. And you are also having thermal mass, rocks on wood-fired stove or rocks on electrically heated stove or gas-fired stove, so that you can pour water on top of those rocks and temper your humidity in the room. You can add that to taste and feel. And so Finnish sauna tends to be high heat, low but not no humidity, and a space that then you are cycling through the experience of that high heat through hot, cold, rest, rehydrate, repeat. Construction wise, and we'll get into this a little bit later, you know, it's wood from the land, rocks from the soil, fresh water from nearby, and heat, and all those things put together in this cultural practice of sauna. Now, when we talk about it in that way, infrared's removed a lot of those key features. They sort of put you in a small wooden box most of the time, but not all the times. We've probably all seen the higher dose, you know, infrared blanket, the sauna blanket. We've probably seen the Amazon little cabin thing that you zip yourself up in, that's an infrared space. But what we're talking about here is that experience of sitting inside a space, and infrared has removed the heat at the appropriate level, any type of stones or ability to add humidity into the room. And it's heating you in a different way. So for folks who have then done traditional sauna, let's say Annette and I, who you've done a lot of it, your body's actually really prepared for that higher heat, and you're not sort of given it. And so it takes longer. It's a little bit like you've been training for a marathon, and then you get asked to sort of uh, walk in
Walk a mile.
walk a mile, and you're hoping for a good workout that day. You're hoping for that good, like, I'm going to do a 10K today. I'm going to put some miles on. So I think there's definitely an experience here where we just have to be really honest about the definitions and what we're shooting for. So we believe that the research is pretty conclusive, and the experience of it and the cultural history of it really points towards more traditional forms of sauna that involve higher heat, more community, more space, more humidity, and an experience that's much more deep than a dose of infrared light along with your day. So that's kind of, as we start to parse out those details around that, those are some key things we want to hit. And we got great questions flying in left and right around all these things. Sylvia is asking, I want to know what's the ideal time for a proper session. And it's a tough one. It's really a tough one, Sylvia, because I'm just going to say one little thing, and then I'm going to give it to Annette. It's a tough one because what we just said before, there are some people who are trained at different levels of this. And it's a lot like saying, what's the ideal duration of running, right? How long should I run, or how far should I run, or how fast should I run? All of those are dependent upon you as the runner. Sound is the same way. If you have done a lot of this, you're going to easily be able to get to those higher temps and go for longer. But if you've never done it before, don't just take Joe Rogan's thoughts on this of just push yourself as hard as you can. You actually want to start yourself slower, lower, and less time. And so going something like 160 to 180 is a really great introductory heat, or sitting on that lower bench, or experiencing it in a way that isn't as long in duration. And so I would say, listen to your body. These are the areas where we need to be, instead of creating more protocols, we need to be creating the ability for people to listen to themselves and the information that their bodies are giving them when they're in the space. Would you add anything else there, Annette, around sort of time? Now, there is some details around the studies have been on certain time limits. We can highlight those as markers, but what are your thoughts on time there, Annette?
So I actually responded in the chat a little bit, and my response was that by virtue of, and I'll grab her book. I never say her name quite right. Susanna Soberg, I think, identified that where we get the greatest baseline, doesn't mean you can't go beyond this, but the baseline is in a given week, 57 minutes collectively of heat exposure above 175. The idea being that you would break those into rounds of no less than 11 minutes at a sitting. And for the vast majority of people, they will want to do, because it's enjoyable, 2 to 3 rounds of that, a minimum of 11 to about 18. That's where the body starts to top out in terms of its willingness to sit in that kind of heat. At 18 odd minutes, you're like, I am hot AF and I need a break from the heat. Intelligently, this is our body saying, and again, you made the analogy around how practiced are you? So you want to balance this ability. And someone earlier mentioned how, and so stereotypical of us as Americans to turn this into some sort of crazy ass competition. It's not a competition, y'all. It's literally what brings you the most efficacious amount of benefit in the most intelligent experience and time. So again, most people will do 2 to 3 rounds of 11 to max 18 minutes, followed by cold plunging of 3 to 5 minutes. And you don't need it to be so cold that you end up with your balls stuck in your neck and you're in a falsetto situation. And of course, I can say that because I have balls. They're metaphorical. I size them to fit the situation. So if somebody's just clutched their pearls, Oh my God. Terribly sorry about that. But the idea is that, again, from all the research that I've done, you want that over the course of a couple days inside a week to do sauna once or twice at a minimum, and more enjoyably 4 to 5 times a week. And those 11-minute odd rounds followed by cold plunging for 3 to 5 minutes in water that can, if you want it, be 38 degrees up to 55 degrees. This range of temperature in the water will affect cold shock protein release. You need about 9 to 11 minutes over the course of a week, 57 in the heat. Now that's very specific. Give yourself a minute, take a minute away, whatever it might be. And of course, the joy in this is doing it with someone you care about if you can. Because part of what sauna offers us is a chance to put down this distraction of our digital devices and to be present in the experience, the felt sense, the breath, centered in our heart, centered with our people, let's call it our people. And so that's probably enough on that. I can obviously keep going if somebody wants a little bit more, but there's what I know and what I practice and what I share as a practice.
So there are so many good questions flying around right now around this area. And I just want to hit 2 little ones, and then we're going to move on to myth 3, because we got to keep rolling in that. But
Yeah, we
one
do.
is, Jennifer brought up this really great one, and she's saying, hey, I've been told by operators of infrared spaces that infrared removes 40% more toxins from the body than traditional hot sauna. Not true? Question mark. For example, infrared sauna being part of a great treatment protocol for Lyme's disease. So in terms of this, I think it's a really important thing to be asking this detox question. And part of it is because it sounds so nice to detoxify your body. Oh my gosh, we live in this world where we are so often getting these synthetic things we're putting into our body, and we need to get them out. And I think it's a question also about how do you use this as a different treatment. Cami is bringing up something specific around treatment for heart disease, and infrared being a good area of that. So I want to hear, Annette, your thoughts on infrared, but I also want to just say one thing about this sort of treatment component to it once we start talking about specific conditions. Annette and I are not medical doctors. And I say that not just legally, but actually, I think it's important to be doing your own research on the medicine for your body and the impact for your body. And what I do know is that so often in the American medical system, when we don't understand things, we don't like them, and we don't use them, and we don't prescribe them. And so I really would invite you to look at how other cultures use some of these things. And this is maybe to your point, Cami. One, listen to your doctor, especially if there's somebody who has, a heart condition. We are not asking to throw them into 38-degree cold plunge and 200-degree sauna. And is infrared a lead up to that? Perhaps. I would also assume that that person would not get told, go run a marathon. But that person might get told, you know what? You should do light cardio workout. You should do some type of light cardio workout. And so rather than throwing the baby out with the bathwater, what if you actually did modulate a sauna practice to support that health condition? And I say that from, seeing health conditions in my family, seeing people and knowing that this is a common practice that actually does help your heart health over time. We have seen that is the study, the big seminal study that we're mentioning in here, and we sent over the link to. Andrew highlighted really, really astutely. It is dose dependent. If you use it more, you are healthier. Just like if you eat your greens more and move your body more, all of those things are true for this study. So I want to highlight this fact that we should be careful around when we hear, yes, do it this way. You have to use it this way, or don't use it for this because it's bad for you. I would want to ask, well, where'd you get that info? How and why? Because I know a lot of pregnant moms in Finland love getting in the sauna.
Mhm.
It makes them feel great. Do they go hard? Do they go super high temps? Do they go for long amounts of times? No, they don't. They totally don't. But it's super, for them, it's been great. I see so often in American culture, doctors say, hey, don't use the sauna when you're pregnant. That's fine to just say, hey, there's some risk that could happen here. Don't do that thing. But that doesn't mean in all circumstances, in all cases, to do that. Annette, can you kind of give us a little bit here, maybe on that broader, but also kind of let's dive just a little bit into this detox question, because it's one that comes up so often that people are sort of hearing when they hear saunas. It's this way to get rid of the hangover from last night.
Wow, you throw the hangover in at the last minute.
I know, I know.
Okay. So my first thought is infrared will get you warm enough that you start to sweat. So that sweating alone is of benefit to all humans. Sweating is a critical way to keep your inflammation limited. It is a great way to keep your immune function a little bit higher. These are critical things to do for oneself. And at the same time, if we're looking at the big bio benefits that come from heat shock proteins and a variety of other pieces, that deep sleep that I referred to much earlier, which is, of course, is talk about positive health outcomes. Deep sleep is going to vastly improve all systems and all system functions. That being said, infrared, like you pointed to, Justin, might be a way to titrate someone who has an existing condition toward a greater degree of health. So of course we have to use critical thinking skills, and we want to evaluate person by person contextually what's best for each of us. And I will concur or side with you in saying that the American Medical Association, and I'm going to use this, I'm sorry, I feel really compelled. This book, Good Energy, is a great read about how it is that maybe the medical association doesn't always have good advice for lifestyle habits that add up to health outcomes that we most want. And I'm not saying ignore your doctor at all. If you want to do the research, go and look for the studies that talk about detoxification that happens as a result of exercise and sweating. Sweating is going to happen in an infrared. It's a great place to get your sweat on. If you're compromised, that might be your starting point. And equally, you might titrate up because all the other things that happen, there's a critical threshold, that 175, and that is a very manageable, again, I'm going to point to the Huberman protocol, where you rest at 175 for 120 minutes. Now you take some breaks. So this is also being addressed in some of the questions. When do you listen to your body? I already spoke to it a little bit. That 18-minute mark is about where your body is going to tell you. And if you're listening patiently, you will hear the body say, like, I just need I need a break from the heat. Take the break. So we usually do a 5 to 7 minute break and go back in for the next 18 minutes at 175. It's surprising what you can teach the body to tolerate. Once upon a time, I too did a marathon, and I started, and I'm not exaggerating, and I don't mean to personalize this, and yet when I first started running with the intention to run that marathon, I couldn't run for 10 minutes. With training, I ran a 4.5-hour marathon 6 months later. So again, critical thinking, personal discernment, listening to your body. And here's where you took us with the very last, like, well, what about sauna for hangovers? Well, hangovers are usually driven by dehydration. Sauna will definitely prompt you to drink more water, which is just an intelligent answer to having drank too much alcohol the night before. And does it help you feel better? Yes, it does. Can you, from a place of feeling better, make better choices? Absolutely. And so that would be where I would say we're looking at, you know, again, specific timeframes are going to be for specific people. Universal answers don't, unfortunately, exist in a blanket statement. Can we point to what could work for a lot of folks? Absolutely. And we're going to keep doing that, because I know you're about to walk me into the next myth, which has to do with, and somebody else has been asking this, what about the seasonality, or when does sauna work in a hot climate? And my answer is all the effing time, because it's not about using sauna and cold plunge to combat your environment. It's using sauna and cold plunge to enhance and better your inner environment and your ability to be responsive to stimulus or stimuli. And so I operate a business that is now, we're 7 days a week. We run 6 of those days, we run 11 hours of sauna and cold plunge a day. We take a half day on Saturdays so that we can have larger events in the afternoon and that we can do deep cleans in the evening. But I'm down here where it's hotter than the devil's kitchen. Basically 9.5 months out of the year, we get a tiny window of, it ain't so hot that you could cook an egg on your car hood, but we're packed. My utilization rate is in the 90s, and I have wait lists consistently for peak times, which are not just 1 hour a day on the morning and evening, but rather 3 hours in the morning. Those are considered peak times, and we run until noon. That's a peak time. And then we go into it at night again. And I'm just sharing that there isn't a right time of the day to do sauna. There isn't a right season for sauna. There isn't a right environment for sauna. It's every fucking where, man. Because the human is designed to seek novelty and what's known as eustress, EUSTRESS. Good stress makes for great humans. And sauna and cold plunge are good stressors. And they're places that we take bad stress and convert it. We actually have an opportunity to off gas and to settle down so that no matter where you live, you can manage yourself more effectively.
Preach, Annette. And I think that is so often in your part of the country, people here, especially in the South. I was in Nashville last week. We're working on a project there. I heard somebody say it, who was one of the builders on site, and he said, "Oh, if I want a sauna and I want to sweat, I'll just go outside." And that idea of, yep, in hot climates, we don't need this. What you're saying, Annette, is, hey, we need this just as much, maybe if not more, in our location here, because we need to invite people into spaces that are the good stressors. Now, counterintuitively, let me just also help people define how we as humans experience temperature. We always experience it by comparison. So I live in Minnesota. Outside, it's the opposite to Annette. It is cold 9.5 months a year. And right now in October, it was 35 degrees this morning. And we say, ooh, let's warm up. Let's put our sweaters on and let's put our scarves on. Oh, yeah. But in April, when it becomes 35 degrees again, yes, I said that. In April, when it comes 35 degrees, the melt happens. We will be wearing shorts here in Minnesota at that same exact temperature, because we have just experienced 9 months of cold. And we're going to say, ooh, that feels good compared to 0 degrees, -10, and snow on the ground. The same is true in the microcosm of sauna in the daily. When we go in and train our bodies in 190 degrees temp, and then Annette's people walk outside to 90 degrees, they are experiencing 100 degrees less of temperature. And the rest of the sweltering heat that day feels kind of nice. Feels really doable. Your body's just been stretched, right? From cold in the cold plunge to hot in the heat of the sauna. And that experience, to give people a broader temperature bandwidth than the 3 degrees of air conditioned room that we are sort of, our bodies are so often trained to be in, is really good for us. So I think we've proven that one, Annette. The myth number 3, saunas are only for cold weather climates, seems busted to me. Myth debunked. And now I'd like to talk a little bit here. This one I'll just kick off. Myth number 4: saunas can be, well, the myth is often saunas can be wet or dry. I think there's a big myth here that has been produced specifically because of hotels, insurance agents, and gyms throughout North America. Has anybody ever walked into a sauna and seen a sign roughly the size of Wyoming over the stove that says, "Do not throw water on the rocks"? Can I get a show of hands? There's a button that you can click your hands on here if you want. Thank you. Thanks, Jonathan, Lauren, Ben. We see some people. Josh, we got hands going all over. Why is that sign there? It is because some insurance agent at one point in that hotel, or the history of hotels in North America, walked in and said, "Wait, how does that thing heat up the room? Electricity? Well, how could we ever put water onto that? Somebody's going to get electrocuted and die." And so there's been this whole myth produced around how sauna is a only dry space. There is no water to be thrown onto anything. And then we sort of get the continual version of that. I would say sauna is always an experience where humidity is in the room, water is over top of rocks. And if you're in a room that has a heater, that is an electric sauna heater or a wood-fired sauna heater or a gas-fired sauna heater, it should be designed to handle water on top of those rocks. And in fact, it probably is. And those are experiences that are integral to creating good quality and, dare I say, just pleasant sauna experiences, as opposed to sort of forcing people into dry heat and not being able to breathe in there. It's a little bit like when people talk about whiskey to me, and they say, "Oh, I don't like sauna." And I say, you know what? If I've only sipped Fireball whiskey in my life, I think whiskey was pretty harsh too. But I know there's really good versions of whiskey and scotch and bourbon. There's
And
some bourbon
tequila.
and tequila. Andrew's mentioning some bourbon things right here. So I think there's a way to understand sauna, and most of these are actually bathing environments. So they often were very wet. People were washing, rinsing. And in this experience, that's what I want to kind of highlight to folks, is that myth of be throwing water on the rocks. And if you aren't in a sauna that doesn't have rocks, you need to be careful, because you're probably not in a sauna, going back to our infrared point. Annette, do you want to say anything else there on that one, or should we keep rolling?
I think we can keep the roll happening, because I
Mhm.
think you gave ample direction on that. And I mean, some people are asking about steaming, and obviously, allow me to say, because of the way that we do sauna, the only thing I would add is that our setup here at Kodawari is very, in essence, wet and hot, like your mom. That always have to get a mom joke in. But the idea is that people are literally in yoga gear when they go from sauna to cold plunge, and they come back with a lot of water. And there's, obviously we build it with drains in the actual sauna to accommodate getting the water out of there. But we have a very wet setup, and we maintain a very high heat consistently. So I believe both things can be done.
Cammie's asking a real specific question around this. I want to hit it real quick. Cammie, you're saying, you guys have an Iki stove. It's a good brand of heaters. We offer steam once during each 15 to 20 minute cycle, but can it lower the temperature in the sauna if you put too much water on? There's a bunch of geeky thermodynamics going on here. When you pour water on rocks, you are in effect lowering the temperature of the rocks, and then in effect doing a lot of that can lower the temperature of the room. And water carries more heat than air does, so it feels warmer. So the joke growing up as a kid when you were like when we were teenagers in the sauna and you got somebody new in there and they had never sauned before and it was like pretty hot for them, is you told them this joke, yeah, just if you're too hot, throw some water on the rocks, it'll help cool it down. It does, letter of the law, it actually does cool it down a little bit, but what's happening is you feel the heat more fully. So the newbie would sometimes run out of the room. It wasn't a very welcoming way to welcome them into sauna. I think it is something to be thinking about for commercial spaces, to be programming around. Annette does this very intentionally around it. We provide folks the sort of intention of, hey, let's do aromatherapy, essential oils. Let's invite people to say, hey, here's how it's done. And then oftentimes we invite them to put more on as they want, as they need, as they desire while they're in there. And overarchingly, I would say, yes, it's true that a little bit lower heats sometimes come with higher humidities, i.e. a bit more full humidity, and a little bit higher than that, you tend to have a little bit less just because of how it can get really, really warm. Let's go to our myth number 5. We want to make sure we land the plane on time here. And this is kind of the big one for us. Annette, it's the myth that I hear all of the time, and we get it because of what we're seeing in our feeds on Instagram and Facebook and everywhere, and all the podcasts, is the sauna is only for athletes and pretty people. It is this spa-like experience that's only for the high performers. It's the biohacker. It's the pro athlete trying to get the best out of their experience and the highest level of life and performance. It sounds a little elitist, and that's just what it is. Sauna is about opulence and elitism. What do you say on that? Is that true? Is that what sauna is?
Bullshit buzzer, push the bullshit buzzer. I have so much heat around. I have so much heat around that concept. One of the greatest things about sauna and cold plunge as a practice is literally how low the barrier to entry is for people that want to transform their lives mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, relationally. So we at Kodawari, and I encourage, obnoxiously, I will encourage people to look at this practice through the spire, spiritually, physically, intellectually, relationally, emotionally lens. And not just about, it's not about exercise and fucking athletes. Unless, of course, we want to say that everyone who's living has an athletic element to their being, which I do believe is true. And so the kicker for me is that the gift here in so many ways is that we can gather. If you can sit on a bench or in a chair and get up and out of a bench or a chair, and, adaptive, we have all the ways to help people that are in a wheelchair. I've had people with limbs that are now prosthetic limbs. I was really struggling with that one, sorry. So the idea that this is relegated to a narrow niche is a huge, dangerous myth. The opposite is actually true. This is, with the exception of a few places, this getting onto a chair, getting off a chair means that the threshold for people is so low and everyone can cross that threshold. There's very little barrier and there's so much gain to be had. And again, we are unfortunately at a critical time in our society where we need to get healthier mentally, emotionally, and physically. Unhooking from our digital, hooking into the relationships that you can build in a quieter, less distracted space, the ability to improve your heart rate. This is a kicker. This is one of the sides. Improve your lung function, improve your immune function, improve your pooping function, your sleeping function. All those things happen. However, additionally to that, so do meaningful connections get deepened or established in the first place. Like part of what happens in my community is community. More and more people are finding that they have someone to resonate with, and this eradicates or at least diminishes the sense that you're alone in the world. You make friends, which means you feel as though, and you know that someone's got your back. You keep an accountability buddy who does the same things, and it makes this sweet and gentle discipline something that creates a lifestyle habit. And the result is that we are spending a significantly more, how do I want to say this? We're invested in living our lives well and together. And I believe that when we strip away all the, how do you feel about your stuff? How do you feel about the title, your job? How do you feel about being a mom? How do you feel about being a brother, a sister, a mother, a father? All these things. How do you feel about being alive? And how do you feel about connecting with other people in that aliveness is where the gift comes. And if it were just for the elite athletes, okay, that could be true. And yet it's not. And I witness it in my community. I have all ages. I have all levels of health. I have people that don't want to lose weight, don't want to suddenly be an athlete. That's not why they're there at all. And that makes me so happy to know that we're providing mental stability, emotional equanimity, resiliency, friendship, a space for people to gather, and then become intentional about the lives they're living. So I said it earlier in the time, which is people who feel better are likely to be kinder, more patient, more tolerant, more present for the things that really matter to them. And I could keep going, but I know, Justin, you wanted to make sure to leave time for people to ask questions and for us to talk about the thing that we did together. So I'm going to turn it back over to you because I could keep going.
You could, but it's good preaching and it's great to listen. And in summation, for me, it actually ties to the original cultural purposes of these practices. And one of my favorite Nordic proverbs, that's the Finnish wisdom that sort of sums this up, is all people are created equal, but nor more so than in the sauna. And I think that is the space that if we do it right, we actually create spaces like this. And dare I say it, I think the world needs that right now. The world needs more spaces like this to find belonging, to find other people, to meet other people who are way different than you. And we are continually seeing that. You know, that sounds poetic and aspirational. The wild thing is that's happening week over week in Annette space in Tampa, Florida with those people. That's happening week over week in Duluth, Minnesota, Minneapolis, Minnesota, here with our folks. And I think that is so interesting to folks who are on the call, who are looking into business or who are operating business or who are feeling it as an enthusiast, is this is stuff that works and it impacts people's lives and it impacts communities. You guys, it's been so fun today to dive in, to hit the myths, to go through all these things. And I want to highlight that Annette and I, we live and breathe this all the time. And if this was helpful, we actually want to invite you. We've been working on something for Annette, I think it's 2.5 years. I think,
a long time.
We say, yeah, we've been friends for a while. We've literally been working on these kinds of things for years together. And I'm going to share something with you now. You maybe have seen a little bit about this. This is our next invitation. So if this was a great sort of over the, having coffee together with us, we want to invite you to another one. Here's an even deeper dive from Annette and I on all things sauna and cold plunge. This is Sweat Equity. Here's our masterclass. It's an on-demand course. You are going to get hours of salty Annette dropping F-bombs, among other words. We're going to get deep dive into the science and the data. And we invite you to go check this out. We put this together. It's really sort of a deep dive into physiological well-being, mental fortitude, and social connection. And you get all of this delivered to you, downloadable, watch all the things, and then enjoy all of it. So please check this out. There's a link in your in the chat window right now. And if you have any questions on this, look, here's Beyond the Hype, debunking the 5 common sauna myths. That's what we just talked about. You guys already know the myths are debunked. And so now it's time to go dive in to all these things. You'll have lifetime access to the course, vetted industry experts, us, along with some details to help you learn along the way, some comprehension checks, some good videos, some reflection questions, all those things, all for $299. So it's kind of our best stuff congealed into one spot. If that sounds interesting, if you want to get that. Annette, would you say anything else about the course that might be helpful to folks?
It does answer in depth a number of other likely more questions that you have, and yet it starts to create clarity around your chosen direction and how this can meet your community, your specific community's needs. And it discusses some of the basics of what health looks like that also obviously includes sauna and cold plunge. So I think the shit's interesting, but I also have to say I did it. So I'm a little biased. Just being honest, transparent.
It's great. So you guys, thank you for being here today. We have folks from all over. Laura at the end says, I've been on lots of your webinars now, and this one has been my fave. Thanks so much from the UK. Laura, such an honor to have you here today. And you guys, please jump onto one of these again, jump over to Sweat Equity, and we can't wait for you to tackle whatever else you got going on today. Thank you so much, you guys, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Annette, thank you so much for being here. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye, y'all.